Welcome to the Principal Podcast, where we talk about how the best professional services firms grow. Whether you're looking to scale your firm or learn from the stories of founders and leaders who've done it, you're in the right place. Join us as we interview the best leaders in professional services. Let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Principal Podcast. Happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. It's a pleasure, sir.
The pleasure is mine. So we are doing this live, and this is the part I love, which is the authenticity and straight to the point. Is the audio better? Can you hear me better now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Which means the audience will be able to hear us as well. Cool. Winn, give us the story. What got you into tech B2B marketing? What led you to start the firm?
Sure. Okay. So, went to school for public relations, communications, and marketing at Loyola University in Chicago. And after that, and worked in two different marketing agencies while I was going to school. After school, actually did a Hemingway thing for a little while, went out to the West Coast and worked on some fishing boats and everything, because I've always been a writer ever since I was a kid. I've just been fascinated with reading and writing and everything. So after doing a little stint of that, decided that, when you have a really good college degree, you should probably use it, and went into publishing at that point. So I was in radio for a little while. I was in newspapers. I've always been a tech geek. I was programming computers when the very first PCs came out, was working on AS400 mini mainframes back before anybody knew about those, and, worked when I was in Chicago going to school. Again, worked a lot in technology, helped a 300-lawyer law firm to transition from terminal-based to PC-based. And so in many ways, my whole career is just a testament to being at the right place at the right time and being very, very lucky. But did publishing for a little while and very much enjoyed it. But it's a hard field to go into, not to go into, actually, it's a fantastic field. It's a hard field to make good money at. I'll just be completely honest. And so in my last iteration in publishing, I was up at a magazine that covered optoelectronics, which is photonics, advanced lasers and imaging systems and everything. And this is really at the very tail end, believe it or not, showing my age here, during the Star Wars SDI initiative, when Ronald Reagan was trying to convince Russia that he was going to put lasers in space and do things that were far beyond our technical capabilities. But with that in mind, so I was working in advanced technology, and was always a geek and loved to write and really, really enjoyed it. And I did that for a number of years. And you start to build all these corporate contacts and companies and everything, and had my background in marketing. So decided that I could go out on my own and do much, much better providing content for larger corporations. And so I started freelance writing and did that. And I like to travel. Back in the day when you're a young man, you do that sort of thing. So I moved around the States and different parts of the world. And eventually had far more business that I could handle. So I would add a couple of more writers at a time, and then copy editors. And then finally just made the decision, well, I basically have the kernel of an agency here. I saw an opportunity. Most of the time when you have folks who are, the create agencies are not necessarily hyper targeted. They're going whatever comes through the door, whatever business comes in, and applying, tried and true marketing tactics, which is all fantastic. But I had a personal brand that was growing and had a lot of contacts in high tech. And it went from lasers, which is a relatively niche little publication, into general automation. So machine vision, artificial intelligence, when it was machine learning and deep learning back for a long, long time, the very first neural networks. Went into robotics, was a big thing. And at the same time, I was doing, a lot of work in some of my last freelance writing solely days. We were doing a lot of work for SAE, for back in the day, Frost and Sullivan, writing some research reports, much of it defense related, because that's where I kind of came into the marketplace. And I just finally decided that it would be more fun to work for companies that made things rather than destroyed them. So we went, even though no disrespect, the world's a dangerous place, and there's a place for military security and defense. There's no question. And I'm nothing but honor for the men and women who are doing those jobs. But, you can make that decision when you've got a small company. So that led to Hardin Business Communications, which eventually morphed into Tech B2B Marketing. And we're celebrating our 30th year this year. So, and now we're about 25 across the agency. Across the agency. About 70% of our business in manufacturing-related technologies, which is the AI, the robotics, the motion control, the machine vision, various IT, SaaS, and everything else. And then about 30 to 40% in electrical power generation and distribution. So, that's our niche. And, we can go into more on that about how I grew the agency by cherry picking both business development and technologists for certain companies that were, benchmarks in the market. But I also went out, when you're starting an agency and our initial focus was really heavily on content, even though I was very, very strong in IT. So, I would go after executive editors, people who had worked in a lot of different industries. You could either, my AEs, which sets us apart, is this understanding of technology and the understanding of the markets themselves. When you are a niche or a boutique agency, you can get very, very deep into a certain customer segment or related segments. So I would go get, account executives that had the capability. They either needed to be, some of them were engineers who could write. Some of them were, writers who understood business organization. But that's really the triangle that I've always built when I've looked for key, at least account level individual in my company, which is you have to understand the technology, you have to understand how modern enterprises work, and you need to understand, how to communicate those two things. So that's what's led us to this point, and it hasn't been a bad decision. So we're all very lucky and pleased, and we've got a small, tight team. Many of the folks I've known for decades, and just really, really glad to be still here. Especially, and we'll get into the future, but I mean, one of the things we're going to talk about in the future is what's going on now, and and the answer is going to be AI, of course. But we'll get to that when we get further down the road.
That we shall. Okay, so you gave us a lot here, Winn. So thank you for this. I want to follow up on so many things.
Sure.
And we're gonna go there step by step. So
cool.
I love the journey. Can you walk us through what is the problem that you help people solve today? Like, what is the outcome that you're helping them achieve exactly?
Sure. Most of our companies are in the B2B technology space. So they're high margin consultative sales. There is a big educational component to it, especially if it's a relatively new technology. And, we're usually on the initial acceptance curve, the initial acceptance side of a technology maturation curve. Although we have a lot of other companies who are, now quite large, multi-billion-dollar IPO publicly traded companies. But the main thing, so it's a mix. I mean, most of our clients are in the small to medium enterprise in the tech sector. So it's about, it's obviously, their main concern in almost every case is going to be lead generation. That's what they need to be able to fill their coffers, to be able to expand their company, to be able to bring new technologies to market. And many of these technologies are really changing, the world for the better. It's, as I work, for example, a lot in automation, there's been a lot of talk over years about how automation takes jobs. But if you actually look at the studies involved, the companies that adopt automation technologies inevitably become more profitable, and their headcount always grows as a result. They're more successful companies. They add more people, they get bigger, and they help to, to bring their value to the marketplace in the world. So, and in, some cases that's helping to do the dull, dirty, dangerous jobs, that we created robots to initially do. In other cases, it's simply making things cheaper so that folks in emerging markets can enjoy some of the wonderful life that you and I enjoy in the States and in Europe and other developed regions. So I really am I don't want to say an evangelist, but, it's an old school term a little bit, but a believer, that technology can really lift all boats and make the world a better place. So mainly it's about lead generation so that they can be financially stable and secure, but there's so many different aspects of that. A lot of it has to do with education if it's a new technology. And that falls underneath the visibility bucket that we're always talking about. And then, we spend a lot of time, since we have a very competent and extensive IT component now, We help take those companies from, 5 to 20 or 50 or $100 million and help them develop the systems, whether it's ERP integrations with front end marketing, with very targeted campaigns and educational campaigns, and all the public venues that you're able to meet customers and talk about that. We help them to develop the systems that will enable that growth, but cost effectively, and with the KPIs that are going to show them they're making the right decisions. So I'm sorry, Gilliam, I'm just going to give you long answers for every question, brother, but feel free to interrupt me at any time, man.
You're good. Cool. So you help high tickets, well, I think the word is high margin consultative sales B2B organizations with lead generation.
Correct. That's our primary, but we have, yes, that would be, if there was one giant umbrella, that's usually their main concern. But as you know, there's a lot of different parts that go into making that a reality.
Oh, 100%. And so what's your take on this? How do you get a high margin, complex product, consultative sales company to close more deals? Because lead generation is the top of the funnel, right? I mean, there are some things above that, but whatever. Lead gen, sales call, proposal, deal, we rock and roll. I think this is going to be particularly relevant for the audience here because consultants are high margin, heavily educational, complex products, long sales cycles. So how do you go about generating leads for your clients, Winn?
Well, that is a large question to try to unpack. Most of the things in B2B technology spaces is that they're selling to other specialists, at least until recently. Until the last 5 or 10 years, it was most of the time it was engineers selling to engineers who needed C-suite buy-in to be able to move forward with any new project or application or manufacturing line or whatever the case is. So, there's a lot of proof of concepts, a lot of the case studies, the clearly defining the value propositions, again, to the engineering department, as well as to, the CFO, the CEO, and the rest of the C-suite. So your messaging in one situation will be more from a business organizational component level. You need to convince both of those individuals to be able to sell in a high margin consultative area. For example, we have clients who produce electrical switchgear, not the highest tech product that our clients sell. It's been around for 70, 80 years. It's well known, but it's also a highly competitive market where there's a lot of people out there who are selling it, from the Eatons, the ABBs, the Snyders, to all the other independents and distributors all in between. So it's about helping them to, it's about helping them to distill their message and be able to target individual audiences that are going to be made in the decision process to get the sale. That's, at a top level, that's what it is. When you get into the minutia of it, which is bringing our contextual and our industry knowledge to help them identify the ICPs that they know in their head, but have not fully documented, and then leveraging those into prospecting databases and helping them build lists, and then helping them, fill all the digital channels, as well as don't do a ton of direct mail anymore, but it's interesting now we're doing direct mail. We're more likely to be mailing out a disposable video tablet that has a personalized message than we are, printed materials, for example, So it really gets into, and we're going to, I'm sure we'll get more into this, but one of the things that clients like about working with Tech B2B is that they've gone to other agencies in the past. Usually they're going to be horizontal, non-specialists. Mm-hmm. And they struggle because they're trying to explain a technology to a company who's never been involved with it. The account executive level, the creative department, they have no clue what machine vision is, or what a YAG-based laser is versus some other solid state versus gas, and the benefits thereof. But when they work with us, they don't need to explain it to us. Yeah. We know that we have different areas and specialists in these various technologies, and they can take over those accounts. And then but at the same time, these are folks who can speak to both sides, right? Mm-hmm. They're not just super geeks, right? They understand the different messaging for the C-suite, for the individual customer, or the engineering and the technologists in the middle, and they can help those clients to achieve whatever the specific goal is.
Yeah.
So hope that gives some insight into it.
No, it does. I love it. And the fact that you started with who is it that you're trying to get in front of, positioning and messaging, send me the right signal. But I mean, obviously after 30 years, you know what you're doing. I think that's for the people listening to us right now. Lots of consulting firms, professional service firms have relied all their life on word of mouth and referral, which is fantastic. It means they have a good product or a good service, which also means that they never had to sell, really, and they don't know how to market. And I think as a stepping stone, if you're looking at setting up a predictable acquisition channel, focusing on who is it that we're trying to get in front of, not vanity metrics, and then tailoring and being very precise on the messaging and the positioning to reach those right people is key. So yeah, I like it a lot. How do you market, Winn? How do you get the attention of those people? Because as you said, they're going to be engineers. There's going to be people who probably aren't that much into marketing and sales. They would just rather do engineering, or at least that's where they started. So how do you go about getting the interest from those people?
Right. All of the clients that come to us, even the small ones, in the 20 million area, for example, none of these people have small dreams or small goals that they're trying to achieve. Very rarely. If they do, they've already been successful multiple times, and they're just super geeks, right? They're just out here to develop new technology. And I've met, 100 millionaires and billionaires who that's where they live and breathe. Trying to get to the heart of your question again for me. Remind me, Gilliam, really quick. How
do you get the attention of these people? Or ask more plainly, what works for you marketing and branding wise?
Right on. So obviously we work all the different channels that everyone does, but when you actually specialize, it becomes a lot easier, because obviously word of mouth is very, very strong. I mean, we've got very strong relationships with the trade associations. We've mentally made that decision to be able to, the individual standards development organizations, those areas where these customers congregate, right? And we develop tight relationships with those become gatekeepers to individual corporations and customers. We're at the events of the trade shows. We know the key media individuals and the editors and the journalists and the publications are all doing that. And they know that we are very specialist and that we can deliver. So, we've just developed these relationships over decades. When a customer comes to us, not only do we understand their industry and where they're in, but we're also able to very quickly have return on investment in terms of increasing their visibility through earned media, paid media, and all these different operations. So that was the kernel of how we started. And then, as you go along, you start to document and, of course, create all your own proof of concepts, and you start to talk about the successes you've had with your company. You got other people who are out there talking you up as much as you are, and then you spend a really good amount of money and you start building a very large website that has a lot of content and examples of what you've been able to do with people. And so then you've got good organic, and then you back that up with, Google and other paid digital advertising, which we do. We get, a lot of new queries through our website. We get a lot of personal referrals. But then we also do other things like I think you as you know very well, we launched the Manufacturing Matters podcast, I think 3 years ago, right? And we just went over 100,000 subs on YouTube a couple of months ago. And so that's been a very big part of our business development. It's a great carrot that you can bring into a customer. And when you have that conversation, especially in our team, when we're able to have a conversation with decision makers at these technology companies, they like that we get where they come from, and that we understand what they're trying to achieve, and that we understand their customer segments. So anytime you can have that in-depth conversation, especially if you bother to take the time to research that individual company, figure out how they fit within the competitive environment in their little niche. And you can talk with them about that. Like we're aware where you are, you're round B or you're round C, or you're a spinoff from X, and these are your primary customers. Which, by the way, if you're not using this out there, guys, if you're not using Claude or ChatGPT to do very quick corporate backgrounders on every new lead that you have coming into your customer, you're missing out. Okay, because the amount of information that you can generate in literally 2 minutes will empower a conversation that can be the difference between, a client that is considering you to a client who is not considering anyone else.
Yeah,
and that happens a lot to us. So we're in all channels, my friend. We're all across in terms of outreach.
I mean, that's what you need to do at some point, right? And I like a firm or a business who drinks their own champagne. French origins, after all. I need to say it like this. So yeah, if the message is, hey, you need to be present, you need to be visible, you don't know where your next lead is gonna look you up, so you might as well be everywhere with the right message, the right positioning, the right content. And then you do this for yourself.
Yes, I mean, it's just like our clients, though. We're helping them to make trade-offs in terms of how to allocate resources, right? And here at Tech B2B, we do the same thing. We do use the same tactics that we use for companies, and we do spend our own hard-earned, financial resources to be able to increase that visibility. Whether it's, we're, 3 weeks ago, I was at the AI4 conference with 3 of our leadership. And if you're not familiar with that, that's one of North America's largest AI conferences, and it was out in Vegas this year. You go out there and you spend a big chunk of money to learn a little, but in our case, it was incredibly validating because looking at these large, you got panels with large enterprises, and then you've got small one-person presentations, usually with a commercial bent. If you haven't been to that show, I'd still highly recommend it. I mean, there must have been between 25 and 50,000 people at the show. It was insane. And it's not a big commercial exhibit component. Like, people are there to learn, but you pay the money and you go out there and you really get a good feel. Are we at where we need to be? Are we ahead of the curve? Because I personally believe that marketing agencies are going through massive revolutionary change, just like the entire world is, even though most people may not be aware of exactly where we're at or where it's going. So just getting out there like that was really good for our team, and we learned a little bit, in the meantime.
So you have figured out a thing or two, Winn, if I may say so.
Thank you.
And I like your style. So let me ask you this, a bit of a curveball question for you now.
Sure.
What is your number one challenge at Tech B2B marketing? What is the one thing that, the one nut that you're trying to crack, that once you crack, you take the whole thing to the next level? What would that be for you?
Well, I think right now, for everyone in this industry and really in so many industries, especially in the service industry, 100% in the service industry, which is where we are. It's how you're going to leverage AI and how you're going to respond to it. The small example, we all know AI slop and everything in terms of whether it's on design, visual design elements, whether it's written word, whatever it might be, animation, etc. It happens. But it's a classic example is that I've hired over the years, I've hired a lot of people with a lot of writers. If you hire a carpenter has a hammer and it sees the entire world as a nail. And if it's a writer, the answer to everything is simply more, better content, right? And so you get these people over and they've been doing it and chugging along for years or decades, and they're really knowledgeable and they have great Rolodexes and network contacts. And then AI comes along, right? And then you've got new entrants that are going to come in and they're going to produce AI slop, and it's going to suck for the most part. But the smart people realized there was a great slogan that was going around AI4 earlier, or I guess it was last month now. And it was that AI is not going to take your job. The person who knows how to use AI is going to take your job, right? So, you really need a subject matter expert, whether it's marketing, whether it's in paralegal. It's not that AI is not going to require that we need paralegals or we need writers or graphic designers anymore. What it's going to do is make my art director the equivalent of 2 or 3 art directors, right? It makes my writers, once I teach them how to go through iterative steps using lots of verification, validation steps, that they're not just pulling from our clients' experiences and their 5, 10, 30 years of experience, which is deep and broad, but we can also tap into basically the entire world's knowledge on a particular subject. So we don't have to wonder, are we missing out on a trend? Is there a gap in our white paper? Is this presentation overlooking something critical? And it's just so much more powerful than our traditional Google search or other even more ancient research capabilities or methods. So the thing that I'm most excited about, and that if I can conquer, and I think all of us need to really be aware of this, is to embrace. First of all, you have to convince our team to embrace AI, because it is not going away. And it is definitely going to do more than simply simplify our invoicing and our client reports or our RMAs or whatever we have, if we're in manufacturing and discrete goods or whatever it is. Obviously, it's going to automate a lot of the back end stuff, but it's going to go all the way up. It's going to go all the way up to the C-suite, So I honestly believe that having logical, smart ways that you can train your staff and you can bring them along, because not everyone is a data mining or a data scientist or something to that effect. Or even a computer programmer, because AI is very logical in terms of how its approach is. But it's also very slick. If you ask Anthropic, Claude, or whatever it is, a question, he's going to bring back an answer that's going to sound like it is totally right and genius, And then you go out to Claude and you say, spin up another agent and just make sure that you're right. Claude's like, oh, yeah, no, I was wrong. I'm sorry. But we have to teach our staff that there's a way, it's another worker. And it's all about how you engage. So I think that is the path to success for us.
Winn Hardin, ladies and gentlemen. Winn, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
They should go to Tech B2B. That's B as in Bravo, the number 2, B as in Bravo.com. I think you can probably see it right here over my shoulder. You can learn more. Look us up on manufacturing-matters.com to learn more about our podcast or join us. And Gilim, I hope very soon that you can come on and join us on the other side of the aisle. Look forward to having you on there, and we can talk. We can swatch seats real quick and see where it goes from there.
Would absolutely love to. We'll put all the links in the description. Go and check out Winn. Winn, I can say one thing for sure. It's that you've gained at least one new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview. Me, I've just added you. Winn, thank you so much for coming on the Principal Podcast.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Principal Podcast. We hope you've learned valuable lessons and strategies to grow your firm and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.